Hi guys, let's finish off this series of lectures on the Forward Engineering project by talking about templates and code spec. Let me back you up real quick and some context. We finished all of our logical design. We did all the work we needed to figure out what we should do, and we're almost to the end of our physical design. The beginning of the physical design was taking our info model and turning it into a database design. We also continued physical design with page prototypes. Now we're going to take those page prototypes and turn them into templates, which are the page prototypes stripped of any information, but including lots of commands for how to fill them in, and a code spec that documents anything that we can't get into the templates because it's a little too complicated to represent in the simple template language that we've developed. Okay, so let's dive right into your first deliverable template. I want you to start from the two-page prototypes that you created previously. So you should have two fully diagrammed or two fully implemented pages, but with sample content. And then for each page, I want you to find all the different parts of the page that come from a database. And so pay particular attention to the difference between stuff that is in your database and stuff that isn't. As I've said before, templates consist of surrounding information and then information that's pulled from your information store. So we take a once through each of those pages just to identify the different parts of the page that are going to be that are eventually going to be replaced, and they're going to fall really into three basic categories. One is that they're simply fields from a table, and you can assume that when you're on a page, you have quote unquote current records from your major tables, especially the info type tables. In my case, it's going to be like the car table. So all you really need to do when there's no particular logic involved in filling it in, like for example, in my case, the title of a car, all you really need to do is flag that as a simple replace, a simple get this information from the database and put it into this place. That's part number one. Those are the easiest. The next ones up are simple logic that just includes, for example, a single if statement for fields that are optional. So if this field is present, then fill it in here. Or for eaches, and I think the for eaches are the most complicated that we're going to get by embedding logic inside the template. So we've gone through all of these before. You'll remember ifs and for eaches from the previous exercises that we did, and I'll illustrate them for you later. What I want to get at right now is that there are three different kinds of things to look for. One are really simple. You're simply going to replace a value that's in your page prototype with some value from the database. The second is you're going to use simple logical operations, an if or a for each operation, to do more than simply just retrieve stuff, but to make some logical decisions. And then you're going to find places where complex logic is necessary, where you go beyond just ifs and for eaches. There's maybe some calculations. Maybe you have to run and merge multiple queries. You might have to do case statements, any other kind of more sophisticated logic. And we're going to flag those as well inside of the page prototype. And then you're going to replace those different things that you found by the markup rules that we specified. The markup rules are really going to be the same as they were before. So one last caveat before moving on and talking more in detail about these things is to be sure not to replace the formatting or layout HTML. The point is here to leave all the layout, all the look behind, and only replace the things that are data. Now there's one big exception to that. And that is you're likely to have things that repeat over and over again, like bullet lists or selection lists or anything like that, where you have the same element repeating over and over again for each value that you might get out of the database. Obviously, for the purposes of the template, you really only need to have one of them in there. You don't have to mark up every single one. And I'll show you some examples of that as we go along. Okay, so for each page, find the parts that need to be replaced from the database, decide whether they're simple or they're logical simple, or they're complex logical. And then we're going to replace them using these markup rules. So you've had these before, and I'll just go over them again to make sure that they're fresh in your mind. Here's for any time that you have something that's coming out of a particular table and field. You use the curly brackets %%, and you'll see that curly brackets %% is our marker for anything that's template code as opposed to HTML, for example. And so here's the markup that you use to specify that a particular table and field goes at this place. I gave you this syntax before, the begin repeat and the end repeat, that has two parts to it, the for each, and so the for each is a place where you type in for each what? For each record in the index table for each car, for each whatever it is you're going to iterate over. You put that after the for each. Then inside the begin and end for eaches, repeats, are whatever HTML, including whatever gets from above, the table.field syntax. So between the beginning and the end of a repeat comes whatever HTML you're going to repeat over and over again. And then we went over this one. This is pretty straightforward. Begin if, and then you can give me if what. If table.field equals true, if table.field equals not null, whatever it is, and then whatever HTML goes in there. And then for the functions, for the place where there's the logic is too complex to really put it right there in the template, just name a function. Create a function and name it, and we'll talk a lot more about that as we go along. Okay, so that's your basic task in creating templates. Here's some more little things to think about. Don't forget, as you're doing your templates, to go through the entire HTML flow and not just the stuff that shows up on the screen. There's all sorts of stuff that are hidden, like the head tag, and lots of attributes inside of HTML tags that also get replaced by database stuff. And so make sure you go line by line through your HTML looking for all the stuff that might get replaced from the database, and make sure you've figured out where it's going to come from. It's okay to add styles and spacing to make it so that you can see visually a little bit better. You'll see in mine that I've created a special sort of span tag that goes around my template commands so that you can more clearly see them. So that's fine if you want to modify the look and feel a little bit so that you can see your template markup. That's just fine. Here's the way to figure out whether something is too hard to do or not. Try doing it with just the ifs and the for eaches, the ifs and the repeats, and see if it'll work. And if it doesn't, then go on and make it a function. So don't go overboard with the functions. You want to try and get the simple stuff right there in the template. And in fact, that's really sort of how it works in the real world. We have templates, then the templates have their own syntax, and there's a lot you can do in the templates, but there's always something that is more than you can accomplish right in the template that you really have to write inside of programming code and run possibly prior to using the template. And so this simulates reality. There's a lot you can do in the template, and I've made our templates pretty simple. They only really have 3 commands: a get, a repeat, and a if. And so it's surprising actually how much you can do with just those 3 commands, but obviously you're going to find things that transcend that. So try not to use a function at first, and when you fail and you can't do it with the simple logic, then go in and create a function. Okay, so I want to pick this up because it's something that I dropped earlier in the class, and I dropped it for a good reason. This, if you'll remember, is the diagram that I showed you about what goes inside of rich text fields inside the database. And I gave you this whole idea of how to model it, and then I sort of let it go because I realized that it was a little bit too far afield for the rest of the stuff that I was teaching in this class. So I want to say something about it one last time, and then we'll let it go, and we'll never come back to it. This is what it takes in order to bring structured information out of a text field inside of a database and still preserve the structure. So when we have a blob, you might say, like, for example, your description fields. Well, I'm going to put a bunch of HTML in there and then just grab the HTML, put them on the page, and the HTML will work right because it's HTML, and there's HTML stored in the database, and when I put the HTML on the page, all will be well. That's one way to do it. This is a different way to do it, which says I can create whatever arbitrary structure I want inside those text fields, and then as I bring the text field out of the database, I can apply other rules to it to make it into HTML. Notice we have something in here called a link. The link isn't an HTML tag. It's not an A tag like you have in HTML. It's a link tag. And the link tag gives us all the parameters of a link that we might want to have. The URL, the page name, what type of link it is, what goes in the hot text, and then on the way out, just as I transform other things on the way out to get them from the database into a particular look and feel in the website, I can transform this on the way out. So I introduced this to you for a very good reason. It's a very, very useful thing, and if we were going any further at all, this is the direction that I would go. But I've realized that it's a little bit too far for this class, so we're going to let it go. So the assumption that we're pretty much going to make is that if you have rich text fields inside your database, those rich text fields contained already validated HTML, so that when you take the rich text field out of the database and put it on the web page, it's all just going to work. That, as I said, is not a great assumption. I prefer not to have that assumption, but it's good enough for now. Okay, so that does away with this, and so you effectively don't have to worry about this, even though it is actually something that's important to understand. All right, so in the stage between your page prototype and your template, there's a few things that are inevitable that you should expect to happen and welcome them when they happen. The first is that you're going to find lots of holes in your data model, lots of things that, oh yeah, it made it into my page prototype. Now I have to find a place for it in the database, but it isn't in there. And so I'm just going to put it in the database, and that's easy enough to do. And as I've said before, be sure to keep your database up to date with whatever is going on inside your prototype, and that will be that's mandatory. A lot of the algorithms that were floating around in your head, like we're going to do this fancy thing and we're going to do that fancy thing, when it comes down to it, and you have to actually create a function to do that, you find that, well, that's a lot more complicated than I thought, or I don't really know how to do that. So I thought I was going to know how to do that. So a lot of your algorithms are likely to simplify, and you'll come to what's probably actually a better way of doing things, because when you're forced to simplify, you get to the essence of what you wanted to have happen without all the complexity of the bells and whistles that you thought were going to happen. Okay, and as always, there's some stuff that's going to take you a tremendous amount of time, particularly the creating algorithms. That was easy in the prototype because the prototype didn't depend on figuring out what all the logic was. Now you have to figure out all the logic, and all of a sudden something that was easy in the page prototype becomes very difficult when you try to actually encode it in a template. And so keep track of that, and don't worry about simplification. But what I do want to make sure you do in your templates is fully templatize the 2 pages that you did in your page prototype. Okay, so now let's go through some of the templates that I put together for the sample exercise, and we're going to look at them first visually. And so I'll give you a tour of what I put together. I prototyped 2 pages, and we're going to look at those 2 pages, and we'll look at them visually first, and then I'm going to go into the template system that I created to make these pages, and we'll look at the HTML. Okay, so let's go out and look at the pages. Okay, so here's one of my page prototypes. You'll remember that this is what it looks like. It's a landing page, and it has a navigation area over here that allows you to select from 3 indexes. It also contains the items that you've already selected. It makes a list of cars that meet those criteria. So this list of cars down here are the list of cars that meet the criteria that you selected over here. That's why I call this the selector area. We have a full view of one car, and it takes 4 tabs in order to fully get that full view out. I can click on a different car in the list, or I can go to the previous car or the next car. And over here I have the associated cars that share something with the current car. And right now for the page prototype, I didn't really have to figure out this algorithm, but I will coming forward. I'll have to do that. And then the call to action button. Who's selling this car? So I can move to the next page. The next page is one car. Oh, let me give you this view of it. The next page is one car at one dealer, with a whole list of the other cars of this type that are sold at other dealers, with a way of sorting them by how I want that list sorted. So this provides my sequence of cars, or actually it's an index of cars that I can get to over here. I have a previous car and a next car over here, and then I have my final call to action button over here, which is what I want people to end up doing, which is drive this car. Over here I have associated cars, and these are also cars that are close to the car that I'm looking at, this car right here, but at the same dealer. And in this little box here, I have the cars that you've clicked on. Anytime you click on a car in here, it adds it to that list so you can easily get back to it. We have car at dealer information up here, and we have dealer information down here. I can click on here and go to a full view of the dealer, but that's not in my prototype. Okay, so that's an overview of what we looked at last time. And let's start on this page, and now let's look at what the templatized version of this page looks like. So here's the page prototype, here's the template. Okay, and you'll notice that look and feel wise, it's pretty close to that page. All I've done is I've taken out the specifics and I've put in template code. I still have all the different tabs, and the tabs still have stuff in them, but you'll notice there's lots of %, and those %, all mark what the template is. And so hopefully this is not surprising to you. You've done this a couple of times already, and now you're just doing it in a forward engineering way rather than in a reverse engineering way. So let's go through the different kinds of ones. Here is a simple one. So I just want the car name, and so we're going to presume that there's some cool car record available to us on this page, and all I want to do is take the cool car name and put it into this format. Notice there's got to be some HTML over here. It's like an H1 or something like that, and the H1 is going to contain the cool car name. Similarly, let me zoom in here. Similarly, we have the cool car description, and the cool car description is in this style. Now you'll notice that I have dark colors here. The dark color is a little bit of a CSS style that I've applied to my template code so that you can clearly see it. It's not applied to all the template code. This one isn't that color, for example, but the pieces that I want to have stick out are that color. Okay, so here was my car carousel. If you remember, on this page, it goes, next through all the cars. And when I look at it in prototype, I'm going to make it a repeat. So I'm going to say for each media item that is linked to a car dealer that's linked to this car item. So in my data model, I have cars. Those cars are linked to dealers, and the media, which is the pictures of the cars and the videos of the car, are all linked to a particular car at a particular dealer. So rather than linking the media directly to the car, I'm linking the media to the car that's at a dealer. So that bridge table car dealer has media associated with it, and all the media that's associated with any car, let's say the Mini, all the media that's associated with any Mini at any dealer is what's in this carousel, and I can go through it. And now it got too complicated in here. I could do this repeat, but when it came time to actually render the code, I decided that it was too complicated and I couldn't use my simple commands, so I created a function. This function is called render car carousel, and later on we can take a look at the render car carousel function to see how it works logically. Okay, then in this area I have 3 repeats again. So I'm going to repeat for any personality trait record that's linked to this cool car, and I'm going to put that right in here. So personality trait name, and notice that I'm going to, when I mouse over that, I'm going to put a tooltip on there, and that tooltip is going to be linked to the personality trait short description. So I have for each personality trait, here I have for each use, and here I have for each owner. So all of those records are all linked to each of these areas here. This car is, best uses are, and was owned. All of those are linked to a repeating statement that's going to output every one of the personality traits, every one of the uses, and every one of the owners that's associated with this particular car. Okay, I'm not going to go through each one in detail. I just want to show you that the same stuff applies to all of these different tabs. Now let me look at this selector over here. So this is a selector area, and I have a function called index display personality, index display uses. So notice it's index display is the function, and then I go colon personality because I want to distinguish a parameter basically that's sent to that function. And we'll talk a lot more about the function in just a moment. Right now, I want you to focus mostly on how is this in the how am I tagging this stuff? How am I making this apparent inside my template? And so I'm saying index display colon personality, and that's going to give me this right here. The car I want is. That's going to give me this whole box. And if you think about it, this box is not so different than this one. It's really just getting the same stuff from a different table, which is why it's easy for me to call this one index display uses, and this one is index display features, right? Well, no, this features one's going to act a little bit differently, but I have index display uses, and I have index display personality traits. And notice once again, I'm going to put out all the personality traits down here that have been selected, and the mouse over is going to give me the short description. And the X button is always going to do the same thing, which is say to the application, remove this one right here from the list. Okay, so that's that takes care of the center area here, the car area, the selector area, and the association area. It was too hard to encode any of this stuff inside of the template, so I just made some functions: top picks, similar personality function, similar features function, and similar uses function. And then for here, this up here is this box that says what you've clicked on, and so I have get clicked on list. So these are all functions. So notice that I made a choice in some of these cases that it was too hard to represent it using my limited amount of template commands, and so I just wrote a function. And in a moment, we'll go and look at the code spec and see all the functions that I wrote to cover all of this stuff. Okay, hopefully that gives you a good starting place. Feel free, of course, if there's anything that you don't understand, to get in touch, and we can go over in a lot more detail. Nothing much different is happening on this page. Blow it up a little bit. We still have the same idea of in the center. I have now, instead of just a cool car record available to me, I have a cool car and a dealer record and a car dealer record. So in this case, I say Mini Cooper, cool car, at Seattle Mini, that's the dealer name, and $23,432, that's the price, and that price is actually in the car dealer. Let's see, oops, this should not say car dealer name, this should say car dealer price. Okay, so that's wrong. There's a bug there. That should say car dealer.price. So this price comes from the car dealer table. The name of the car comes from the cool car table, and the dealer's name comes from the dealer table. So that's what I'm saying right here. This is what's going to produce the title. And then I have a render carousel here. So on this one, I'm rendering the car dealer carousel. Before, I was rendering the car carousel. And then I have lots of fill-in stuff here, and some functions. Like here's the get Google Map function that will put Google Map in here. That's the little Google Map there. And then all of these things you can see I'm just replacing with a lot of replaces, with a lot of gets. That's going to be the address of the dealer, the phone number of the dealer, the email of the dealer, the Facebook address of the dealer, the hours of the dealer, etc., etc. So by looking at this template, you can see that I've replaced pretty much all of that with fill-ins. So a lot of the stuff in here really is just fill-ins. There's not a lot of complex logic, but notice over here, I'm just going out to functions because the logic was too detailed. And so a little bit of a conclusion we can draw from here is that usually it's the navigation and building of the access structures on the page that require the sophisticated logic. And for the most part, and at a general level, building the full view of an info type is really just a matter of getting all the records that are associated with that full view and pulling different bits and pieces out of the different table fields and then flashing them onto the screen in the appropriate HTML, inside the appropriate HTML, so that they render in the place and with the look and feel that you want them to. Okay. So that's my templates visually. Now let's spend a moment looking at my template system. And the template system that I used here is much more sophisticated than anything that I need you guys to do. But I want to show it to you anyway because I think that it really helps you to kind of burn in this idea of templates. It might seem that it's sort of, why do I need to go through this extra step kind of stuff? But when you see the template system, I think you'll realize that what we're really doing when I have you mark up all of these things is I have you going right up to the edge of an actual real template system without going into a real template system. So my goal there was to have you learn about templating and not force you to use an actual templating system, because once again, that's a little bit more than I could expect from you in this class. But certainly in the real world, the templates that you make, the HTML templates that you make, are going to be directly importable into some templating system. And the only thing that's different is the commands that you use for filling stuff in. Okay, so let's look quickly at my templating system, and I want to show you how the idea of the templates flows naturally into an actual templating system. So the actual templating system that I'm going to show you is XSLT. This is a way of doing templates. And in fact, what I have here inside of this thing called an XSL is all my different areas. I have the banner area here, I have the association areas for cars here, the association area for the dealer, the content area for the car, the content area for the dealer car, both of the selector areas, and then I have a page level template. So if you remember when we talked about templates, we talked about page level templates and area level templates, and how the page level template calls in the area level template. The page level template is at a higher level than the area template, and the page level template is responsible for finding that area level template and running it. And that's exactly what happens in this system. So if I go to my page level template here, I'm going to open up the page level template, and you'll see that it's an HTML page. So here's the HTML tag, here's the head tag with all sorts of stuff in the head tag, here's the body tag, And the body tag has all of the structure of the page. Here's the div that lays out the banner area. And then all I do inside this banner area is I call the banner template. So this is a little program. Templates are programs that are there to build pages. This particular program at this point in time is going to go find the banner template and call it and put it in here. If I go to the banner template, we can see all the code inside the banner template. So here's the banner template that shows everything that goes inside the banner. So the banner is basically a global nav, right? It has the words, the car pourvu, that's the name of the site. And then it has a bunch of buttons that are rendered by these ULs and LIs. So the page template calls the banner template, and the banner template has all the code you need, starting from this div, right? It's all inside this div, and then the div opens up and it's got the rest of the stuff in it. It's all the stuff you need in order to render that banner, and the page doesn't actually have the banner on it. The page calls the banner in. That's the beauty of a templating system, is that I can break the banner out. I can reuse that banner in many different pages, and I now have a system of templates embedding other templates that make the page happen in a very efficient way. And when I want to change the banner, I just go to the banner template, change it once, and it's guaranteed to be changed in all the places that the banner is being called in from. Okay, similarly, I have a three-column display here. So this one is the first column. This is the selector area. And the selector area does something called a choose. It chooses among the different selector areas. It can render the content area it can run the selector for the dealer car page, or it can run the selector for the car page. Okay, so I don't want to go too much further into the mechanics of this templating system. What I want to show you is that you can put it together in a very structured way. And in fact, the pages that I created there weren't created by hand. These template pages, and for that matter, the prototype pages that I created, this page as well as this page, were created automatically by my templating system, and I reused a lot of the code in that templating system. Now, as I said before, I don't need you to do this. I don't need you to make these, to make a sophisticated templating system. I think that's beyond the scope of this class. But I want you to recognize that we're right up against that next step. The next step would be to make your templates real and to make them actually implemented in a templating language like the one that I use. My templating language is called XSLT, but there's all sorts of other templating languages that are out there. And so my goal is not to teach you a particular one. My goal is to teach you that templating languages are out there and how you prepare for them. This page is prepared for a templating language, and the only thing that I'd really have to do to take it from here to a real templating language is replace the syntax of curly bracket %% with whatever syntax the templating system that you use wants for that sort of thing. Okay, so bringing this back around, let's see, where are we here? There we go. I talked about the templates in general, and I've talked about a system for making those templates. And now to review again, what I want from you is fully implemented templates on the 2 pages that you prototyped, using the command structure that I gave you, and being very careful to see what can be done with just the simple commands I gave you, and what can be done what has to be done using some more logic. So let's go now to that some more logic place, and that's the second deliverable. The second deliverable that you're responsible for, and this is the last deliverable in your project, is a code spec. The code spec is the additional information it's going to take in order to make all of those functions happen. So every time you said, well, this is too complicated, it's not just a simple for each, it's not just a simple if, you made a function, you named it. And now is the time to define those functions. So what's the point of this code spec? It provides direction to your implementation team. So the reason you would create this code spec is to tell the people who come later and actually do all the programming and all the coding to make your system happen exactly what you intend to have happen. So you'll see that I don't write it using a particular programming language. I write it with an eye towards being as explicit as possible about what the logic is and what we're going to use from the database in order to make that logic work. And then the next step is you hand it to a coder. So as I said early in the class, I had some idea that I might make you do some coding in this class, but that as well is beyond the scope of the class. And so rather than making you code, I'm going to get you to specify what the coding would be about by this code spec. Okay, next point of it is I want you to go as far as is feasible in this class towards implementation, towards the actual building out of the site. From the end of this class to a completed site, the only thing that's missing is a lot of programming talent. Programming talent to implement what's in the code spec, programming talent to implement what's in the templating system. So the templating system is a piece of programming that's necessary in order to fill pages, and what's in the code spec is what goes beyond the templating language and has to be coded maybe right into the application logic itself. Okay, I want you to see the final consequences of your design, and that's why this code spec is important to me. It's the final sort of putting the rubber to the road in this project and giving you a chance to say, really, how does this get implemented, and is it feasible to implement this? Okay, and that takes us to the last point here, which is when you throw your design up against the ultimate reality, which is, can somebody code it, you find that your design gets a lot sharper. It gets a lot more sophisticated, and it gets basically all the kinks out of your design when you have to say exactly how it gets. Okay, so that's why I want you to do a code spec. The code spec itself, you can use the template that I give you, and I'll go over that template in just a bit. And I want you to pay attention to each section, and for every function, have each section, even if nothing goes in it. So you'll see that there's prototype UI, where you clip out a little piece of your page prototype to say what part of the screen is this logic building. You're going to say what the function does, a sentence or two that describes why you have that function and what its point is. What type of access structures it renders, if any. It might not render an access structure, but oftentimes they do. They'll render a sequence or an index or a hierarchy or something like that. I want you to understand what it is you're actually putting on the screen. What parameters it needs, what parameters you're going to have to pass to this function in order to make it happen. The key queries, so the database queries that this function is going to rely on. And then the logic, which is a high-level bullet-like list of the things, or numbered-like list of the things that this logic has to do in order to render its page. The one that I'm about to show you came out to be about 30 pages. I didn't have to try to make it 30 pages. In fact, I was trying as much as possible to keep it simple and keep it down, but that's just what it took in order to document all my functions. And there is a lot of white space in here because of the queries and the pictures and stuff like that. But there's no required length for this. But you know, the fact that mine was 30 pages is an indication to me of about what it takes in order to fully document all the functions, at least all the functions that I needed. I can't tell what functions you need, but take whatever time or whatever amount of space it takes to document what you need. Okay, so let's take a look at my spec now. And the spec that I created is in Word. So let's go over here to Word, and we'll start at the top. So pretty much all the standard stuff in here, all the different, well, you'll see when I tell you about the template, what the template for the spec, what's required. But pretty much you just follow along with what I did. So features and functions is at the top level here. And then I want you to paste your controlled vocabularies in. You've already handed in your controlled vocabularies, but this is like their final resting place. So take the controlled vocabularies and get them in here as well. So I won't go over controlled vocabularies anymore because I talked about that before. But we have features and functions, and it's broken down by the different pages. And then some of them are shared. So the global nav buttons, for example, they're not just on one page, they're on all the pages. The like buttons are on multiple pages, and the get clicked on list is also on multiple pages. So these are the ones that are shared among pages. But basically I have page number 1, page number 2, and all the functions that are necessary in order to build page number 1 and page number 2. So here's my render car carousel function, and you'll see that it has all of those sections, prototype UI, prototype UI, and there's a little screenshot of the UI. What this function does, a sentence or two about why this function is there and what it does, the type of access structure it renders. In this case, it renders a sequence. That's a carousel, right? Next button. That's a classic sequence. What parameters it takes. In this case, it takes a car ID. All you need to do, give to give this function is a car ID, and it will give you back all the HTML you need in order to render that carousel. Here's the key query. And so here's a query. I modeled this query in my SQL Workbench tool, and just took a picture of it and clipped it and put it in here. You can try putting in queries in text. Sometimes if you paste in text, the text gets really hard to read. So this way of pasting it in as an image make sure that it fits on the screen and it's easy to read, even if it is a little bit small. So these queries should be realistic queries that you would use in order to capture all the information that you need in order to do this function. This function is render car carousel. Going back to going back to here. Where are we? Going back to here. What we're talking about is this, the car carousel. And so there's a little bit of logic and querying that's necessary in order to make this thing happen. And the code spec here is what's going to explain that. So here's the query. Obviously, the query is going to get something having to do with the media that's attached to a car. And as I said earlier, the media that's attached to a car is not actually attached to the car itself, but it's attached to the car dealer record. The car dealer has pictures because all the pictures we have are pictures of cars that are at dealers. We don't have any generic pictures of the Mini. We only have pictures of the Mini as it's at one or as it's at some dealer. We also have the idea of the primary image because we want the primary, because in this one we want only one image from every dealer, and so we're going to designate one of the images of the car as the primary image, so that as you scroll through that carousel, you're not going through 15 images of the same car at the dealer. You're only going through the primary image of that car at that dealer, and then going on to the image of another car of another car of that type at a different dealer. Okay, and then there's the logic. If you're interested, you can read through this logic, but it's pretty simple. The query returns all the primary images for each car dealer record for the car ID that we pass. Then it renders each of those records in HTML using this HTML. Now notice there's an HTML fragment in here that I clipped out of my page prototype and filled with the right information. So here's what it took to put it together in the page prototype, but in the page prototype I had actual stuff in here and I had actual file name, etc. Here I want to say that this place right here is replaced by the media.filename, that this down here is replaced by the dealer ID, that this is replaced by, let's see, dealer name. All of these things are pieces of information that come out of the database, and we're going to render this little chunk of HTML for each of the pieces of media, and that's how we're going to render the car carousel. Okay, one other thing to pay attention to here, in my page prototype, most of my hrefs, I just said href equals pound just to get it out of the way, and it wasn't necessary in the page prototype. But here, I want to figure out what's going to happen. In this image here, my intention is you click at this button and you go to some car dealer record, right? You go to that car dealer, you go to Seattle Mini, and this particular Mini Cooper, whichever one this one is, at Seattle Mini. But what I want to have happen here is there's a car dealer page, and I'm going to pass it the parameter of the dealer ID. And oh, that's not correct. Car dealer. This is the car dealer. Car dealer ID. There. Okay. So I'm going to pass it a car dealer ID, and that's going to tell me which record. If I click on this, it's sort of like clicking here. I go to a page like this. I need to know which car dealer record. So this is the car at Seattle Mini. Which one of those I'm displaying, because all this information is going to come from that record. So here, when I make the click and I click on that link, it's going to pass the car dealer ID into my system so that I can display the right page. So I want you to go as far as you can with figuring out how the parameters are passed, as well as just what the structure of the function is. And so that might be a little bit difficult for you. If it is, talk to me and we'll work a little bit through it. Okay, so that's one piece of logic, and that piece of logic renders this car carousel. This one right here. That goes forward and back through all the images, the primary images of the car at each different dealer. I'll just do one more because I feel like I'm going a little long here, just to give you the idea, and it's the top picks. Top picks is this piece of UI right here. Corresponds to this one right here. How do I come up with these top picks? So almost every one of you is going to have an issue like this, which is I want to give a sequence of the ones that I think you should see most about, and how am I going to figure out how that sequence works? So in this case, this is my top level description. This function outputs a link of lists to cars that are like the current cool card record. The list is ranked by the amount of overlap of each kind. So personality, use, and feature, those are my three kinds of overlap, and also a weight for the dealers who carry the car. The weights I'm going to assign based on how much I get back from those dealers. So when I show a list of prioritized cars, there's two things that I care about. One is how much overlap is there between that car and the car that you're looking at. The other is how much do I like the dealer. So I'm going to use both of those weighting factors in order to figure out who comes first. So a car that's very highly related, but I don't get anything from the dealer is going to come down, is going to come below a car that's really highly rated, and I have a good arrangement worked out with the dealer. So that's what I decided. I just made that up, and then I'll work it out. So here's a number of queries that are used. Something I should say here is that, and probably something that you should do as well, your focus here is to make things as clear and understandable as possible, not to make them as efficient as possible. If you could write one query and it packs a ton of stuff into it and is really efficient, that's a great query when you actually go to implement. But as you're trying to explain what happens, a series of simpler queries is going to be much better at explaining. So I started out here trying to write the most sophisticated query I can that does all the work, and then I realized that it takes forever to figure out what those queries do, and it really doesn't help you guys understand the logic. What helps you guys understand the logic is to make simple queries and to show how those simple queries combine together. So don't spend as much time making really fancy queries as you spend making really good logic and making simple queries that are easy for us to look at and understand and decide how you use them. Okay, so here's a series of queries that are used for this function, and then the logic. And so the logic says a dealer has a weight based on how much money they give us. I talked about that, and it's 1 to 100. And a related car gets a maximum of 100 points for shared personality, 50 points for shared uses, 100 points for shared major features, and 250 points for the dealer. So notice all the overlap, 150 and 100, adds up to 250. And so it's equally weighted between how much I like the dealer and how much the car overlaps. And now I come up with this ranking algorithm. Here's the way that I'm going to figure out which car comes first. I'm going to do all the things, all the steps here, and in the end, these steps are going to lead me to the cars that are most related in the order that I want them. Then I have a little section down here about how I'm going to display it. So first I rank the cars, and then for each ranked car, I create this little piece of script, or this little piece of HTML, which includes the link when you click on it. So I'm going to go to a landing page, and I need to pass that landing page a cool car ID. Otherwise, the landing page isn't going to know what I want to show on it. And then I'm also going to run this function called add the car to the click list because I'm here, and every time I click something here, I have to add it to this list. The little function that goes along the side here that says, oh, when they click on one of these things, don't only go to the page that describes that car, also add this car to the you clicked list. So you can see the Honda Fit, for example, was already added to that list. Okay, and then I have a couple little notes, and one of those notes says this comma here at the end only gets added if it's not the last record. This is a common thing when you're creating lists and you're doing transforms and making lists happen, that you need commas and the first through the almost last item in the list and the very last item in the list, you have to suppress the comma. Okay, so that's just a little piece of extra stuff that's thrown in there. Okay, I think that I'm going to leave the discussion there because I don't want to just bore you by going on and on, but I do want to give you enough of a description of things that you have a feeling for what's going on. And again, if it gets confusing or there's some stuff you want to ask, let's talk about it, and I'll help you get past it.